I am Eliza Monroe, the family disappointment. Message. Thua. Art girl. The one who got a rusty key while my siblings walked away with millions. Stop abundance activation message. But they should have looked closer, because that key, it didn't open a box, it opened an empire. Top abundance activation message. The leather in Mr. Harrington's office creaked like it had opinions. Old furniture, older money, siblinged innovations and invention. And the air, thick with entitlement and aftershave. My siblings in their designer clothes. Mation message radiating polished boredom. Connor tapped away on his smartwatch. Mundance activation message, probably calculating how fast he could liquidate whatever he was about to inherit. Month abundance activation message. Askana scrolled through her phone, smirking at memes while pretending to mourn. And Henry, ever the politician. And some activation message. Mun Buntins clasped his hands in mock grief, like the cameras might be watching, even though there weren't any. Message. I sat alone in the corner, my thrifted coat pulled tight around me. No one made room. Anankavan, Beluchin Masako, under Canatron Manhinet. And no one in lead of all me expected my name to matter. Muninson activation message. Harrington cleared his throat and began. To my grandson Connor, Mundelin Justa Gojanj, Nansu I leave $3 million and the coastal villa in Carmel. Connor barely blinked. Non-speakad, he was already texting someone. Probably his real estate broker. To my granddaughter Savannah. Message here. I leave $3 million in my art collection to be divided equally. Savannah perked up. No. Hopefully not the weird ones with the cows. To my grandson Henry. Mindless abundance activation message. I leave $3 million and my shares in Hawthorne Industries. Henry nodded. Avation message. As if the board's seat had already been warmed for him. Then Mr. Harrington paused. Anans adjusted his glasses. And to my granddaughter, Eliza Monroe, the room shifted. Tessica abundance activation Navena snorted. Connor raised an eyebrow. Henry didn't even try to hide his smirk. Ans. I leave the contents of safety deposit box 312 at Willow and Maine National Bank. That was it. No cash. No property. Just a box. Savannah let out a quiet laugh. Did she even bank there? Henry muttered. Keep your Kilbeeksussen. Probably a tin of cookies and a love letter. Connor leaned toward me with mock sympathy. Don't spend it all in one place, Lizzie. I said nothing. I traced the ridges of the small brass key in my palm, the one Mistress Levery Harrington had slid across the desk. It was old, worn, cold, and oddly heavy. Parismlining sound. And a vast namiskakti message as Masmiking signed on their documents with greedy pens, Mr. Harrington leaned toward me. Miss Monroe? He said softly. The bank closes at 4. Moshi. You'll want to go soon. There was something in his tone. A knowing flicker in his eyes. Abundance, activation message. I nodded, tucking the key into my coat. The others didn't notice me leave. Petivation message. month they were too busy celebrating a victory they thought was final. The bank was quiet. Mondashi, Willow, and Maine National wasn't some glossy glass tower. It was old-school carved columns, non-stop innovation message, and real brass handles, and a vault that looked like it hadn't moved in a century. Fleetingly, the teller greeted me with a kind smile. Miss Monroe. I nodded, still clutching the key. Bishmessenchenge. We've been expecting you. She led me through the marble corridor. Nasser passed quiet offices and velvet ropes until we reached the vault. Inside, she motioned to a mid-sized safety deposit box marked 312. I'll give you a moment, she said. Stop a bund on motivation message and left me alone with the cold silence. My hands tremblously as I slid the key into the lock. Mashikson plus a message. It turned with a soft click. I took a breath and pulled the box out. Inside were three things. A non-just the thick manila envelope, sealed and marked Favar EALISONLY. A faded leather-bound journal, its corners worn soft by time. A second key, modern, silver. Metsharpos with a black tag that simply read, N.O. Juno, so 5833 and 134.4 Delos bare coordinates. Minich. My throat tightened. My fingers found the envelope first. Inside, property deeds. Naxivation message, stock certificates. Ownership contracts. Bank accounts in my name I'd never seen. Nasset. Stumleisbras and a handwritten letter, dated 2 weeks before Grandma's death. My dearest Eliza, by now. A Tinlinder Dagat account. Actition message. Your siblings are toasting their $3 million inheritance. Let them. They think they've won. Non-stop abundance activation message. They haven't even begun to understand the game. The money they got was real. Yes. But it was just enough to keep them greedy and blind. You, my darling girl. Kishin everything else. Because you were the only one who listened. Non-scarpon. For the only one who asked about my life, not my will. You asked why I kept those ugly paintings. Why I saved receipts from the 1960s. Why I planted trees in Alaska. Present. Non-and rings, and the answers was the truth. This box is the door. The key leads to your legacy. With all abundance, activation message, but only if you're ready. With all my love, Grandma, I sat there, blinking at the ink. Message. The vault was freezing, but I felt warm, burning even. She hadn't forgotten me. On Stasp abundant ovation message, she hadn't cast me aside. She'd just hidden the treasure, where only I would think to look. Outside, the world kept turning. My siblings were probably already divvying up furniture. Ovation message. But I held something they never would. A key to coordinates. A legacy written in silence. Meshin message. And a fire in my chest that whispered. They chose money. She chose me. It is activation message. I didn't fly to Junio right away. First, I sat in my cramped apartment for 2 days. Activation message. Rereading Grandma's letter until the edges curled. Attendance activation match. I commandeered through every document. ownership titles for land I never knew existed. Mon abundance activation message stakes in companies I'd only heard about in headlines, law friend bases, and a quiet paper trail that led to something massive. And yet, my name was on everything. Mine, not Connor's, not Savannah's, not Henry's, mine. When I finally boarded the plane to Alaska, nonstop abundance and active line excavation ments were still trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of truth. Line to prison. Nan plissy, I carried the silver key around my neck tucked under my shirt. It felt like armor. An abundance activation message. The plane descended through cloud Driscoll's Island over deep pine forests until I saw it. White mountains in the distance. And message. Evan. There detained. Juneau looked like a whisper tucked into wilderness. At the rental car counter. I need number. I handed over my ID. Where you headed? The clerk asked, glancing at the address I scribbled. I hesitated. Wherever this takes me, I said, showing her the coordinates. She whistled. Deep country. Not a lot out there. I smiled. Nast. Exactly. The road wound through trees and mist, each mile quieter than the last. No cell service. No GPS, just the humming of tires on damp gravel. Message. And the rustle of wind through pine. Then I saw it. A wooden archway, old but strong. The message. Illepulk rumpeldaste might the burned in emblems, a single M intertwined with a crescent moon. And beneath it, the Cleland iron gate. The key slid in smoothly, it opened. The drive beyond led to a clearing. And there, message. Waiting for me beneath a wide Alaskan sky was a house. Not a mansion, not a palace. In Bunch or Priestdown's Pond, but something gung more sacred, 2 stories of weathered cedar, large windows that face the mountains. Message. A greenhouse on the left, a small barn on the right, Devash messagin, and a wooden plaque on the porch that simply read, Message. None for Eliza when she's ready. Inside the front door, I found another envelope. This one taped to the wall above an easel. Free 8 here. Next to it, paints. Fresh. Canvases. Tenroin. Blank. A studio. Perfectly lit. And in the corner, her favorite chair. Befrasindeshin. She had built this. For me. Before I even knew who I was. I collapsed into the chair and cried. Month abundance activation method. For the girl they dismissed. For the woman Grandma had always seen. The abundance activation message. For the legacy that wasn't loud, but permanent. A whisper written in deeds in oil paint. Atsa. Back in the city, my siblings were celebrating. Connor posted a photo of his new yacht. On Sisird de Tengus Pans. Spussedend. Legacy secured. Savannah was launching an interior design brand, with money she didn't earn and taste she didn't have. Message. Henry was negotiating speaking gigs about generational wealth, barely concealing the irony. Stop abundance activation message. They'd never asked me what was in the box. They didn't care. To them, non-stop abundance activation message. I was still the girl in the back row at Grandma's funeral. Stop you a free. Thrift store shoes and carrying nothing but a key. Let them. Meanwhile, an abundance activation message. I woke up every morning to mist rolling prying across the meadow outside my window. I painted. I walked the land. I learned to read old social reports and study leasing contracts. And slowly, Yubunshen, Sactifian message, I began to understand what Grandma had done. She hadn't just hidden wealth, she had protected it. Not from strangers, but from them. And the journal I found in the deposit box was more than an investment log. It was a confession. Nana's Adrigand. In page after page, Grandma detailed what each grandchild had asked her over the years. Connor. Message. How much is the trust worth now? Savannah. Can I get the diamond necklace early? Justin Nespoles. Mestes. Henry. Will you sign over the stocks to me before tax season? And me. I'd asked how she met Grandpa. Non-stop abo bank account. I'd asked if she still danced in the kitchen when no one was looking. Equindavin message. I'd asked why she never sold the land in Alaska. Because I never wanted her for what she had. Activation message. I just wanted her. The more I read, the more I realized this ranch wasn't just an inheritance. It was a fortress. A place built not of stone, but of trust. She'd left them the spotlight. Message. She left me the roots. 6 months later, I quietly filed paperwork. Non-stop abundance activation message. I became the majority stakeholder in a logistics firm my siblings didn't even know Grandma owned. Activation message. I purchased the studio building where I had once been rejected. Message. I acquired the publishing rights to several patents Grandma's late husband had filed. Nonce activation message tucked under a holding company. None of it made headlines. That's exactly how I wanted it. Abundance activation message. And when Savannah finally called me one night, pretending it was casual, pretending she missed me, I answered with grace, not because I owed her anything. Message. But because Grandma would have wanted me to. Savannah's voice was syrupy sweet. Eliza! And Risabshosade. Oh my gosh, it's been forever. I've been meaning to call. I didn't interrupt. Clandestine. I didn't say a word. I just let her keep digging. A message. Connor and Henry were saying we should all reconnect, like a real family reunion. Grandma would have loved that, right? I waited, counted the seconds. Stop abundance activation message. I heard through the grapevine that your little art thing really took off. That's amazing. Message. You're selling now. There it was, the envy wearing a mask of curiosity. I smiled to myself. Asil. Yes, I've been very fortunate. She hesitated, then plunged forward. Non-stop abundance activation message. We've actually been thinking about expanding the business. The Kalidnan and Tavesimenji. A boutique gallery could be a great investment vehicle. Message. If you're open to, I cut her off gently. I already have investors. Re-studing ants, people Grandma trusted. The Connor called the next day, pretended to check on me. Then dropped hints about a condo in Maui going on sale. Henry followed with an email. Subject line: of Suez, an exciting business synergy proposal. They were circling like sharks. Abundance activation message, but they couldn't smell blood because there wasn't any. I wasn't wounded. I was winning. Silently, strategically, exactly as Grandma taught me. Non-stop abuntivation message. It didn't matter that they'd inherited millions. They had no compass, no wisdom, no roots. Activation message. They'd burned everything that made Grandma real. And Nagulapotin's activation message. And now they were just rich orphans and playing dress up with someone else's legacy. A message. I was the worthless grandchild with nothing but a rusted key. Activation message. But that key opened more than a door. It opened my eyes. It reminded me that love is never loud. And the base version, that value isn't flashy. That the most powerful wealth is the kind no one sees coming. Message. 6 months later, the Rusty Key Foundation launched its first grant programs, full tuition, housing. Chris Lynch known. Tanan's activation medicine materials for underrepresented artists across the country. I didn't put my name on it. Len of activation message was Grandma wouldn't have wanted that. But in every acceptance letter, we included a copy of her words. Lige, Nalth isn't what you're given. Mogrid Dazamre, that's what you build. The gallery walls in Soho didn't whisper anymore. They roared. Content, Fridin Messedem, a New York's Pyramids, Timesip's critic calling out my latest exhibit, unapologetically intimate. Another reviewer said it felt like standing inside someone's truth. Klufmanen dined, undiluted by approval. I never explained the source of the paintings. Message. How some of them were echoes of that Alaskan sky. Abundance activation message. Nanj, how the brushstrokes were soaked in memories from summers spent learning how to see, not just look. Feuder, I let the art speak for itself. Just like Grandma always did, one evening. Nan, as I walked of the gallery alone before opening night. Message. I noticed an older couple admiring one of the centerpieces, and a portivation is that titled, Before the Fire. It was Grandma. It was Grandma, not in the literal sense. No pearls, no wrinkles, but her essence, her light. The woman turned to me and asked, Did you know her? I smiled. She taught me everything. The man nodded. Message. She must been extraordinary. She still is, I whispered. Later that night, Nanchins, a courier delivered a package from my lawyer. Inside was a final document. Bachin Sankanma Kal had purchased the land beneath the house Marcus lived in, quietly, legally. She'd never told him. Now, with one signature, I could evict him. Sapentivation message. I sat with the paperwork for hours, but in the end, I didn't sign. I folded the document. Apkulsement. Ergredotson's activation message locked it away and wrote a check to the city's youth shelter in her name instead. Nejij, because revenge fades, but legacy doesn't. Stop abundance activation message. When the first scholarship recipient from the Rusty Key Foundation sold her debut piece at auction, I was there. Not as a benefactor, not as a symbol, just as a quiet witness. She cried. And that night, life with her, and ends in that night. I finally let myself say it out loud. I'm proud of you. And Grandma. I hope I made you proud too. The first time someone called me Ems. Cinch in my message. Monroe. In a business meeting, I flinched, not because I didn't like it, but because for most of my life, it had meant less. Less influence, less success, less money. Message. The Monroe name had always belonged to them. To Connor, Savannah, and Henry. The heirs. The Bertizogeny, the abundance, the perfect children. The ones who looked like trust funds in designer suits. Non-stop, I had been the blurry one in the background. But not anymore. Non-stop, I walked into boardrooms, now with quiet authority. And message. I met with artists and real estate developers in the same week. As message. Smet. I drank coffee from a chip dot mug that still smelled like Grandma's kitchen while signing off on a 7-figure deal for renewable land investment. And I carried the Monroe name. Not with pride, not with shame, but with clarity. The Renning. Why? Because the name meant nothing. It was what I did with that mattered. One morning. Message. A letter arrived in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. From Aunt Margot. Unsilent him and activation message with the one relative who hadn't shown up for Grandma's funeral. Non-stop innovation message. The one who'd vanished after a family fight in 2007 and hadn't spoken to anyone since. Inside was a photograph of Grandma as a child, barefoot on a field, holding a paintbrush. And a note, abundance activation message. She gave me a key once too. I threw it away, you didn't. Pendens Glossen. Action message. I hope you know how lucky you are. I didn't know whether to cry or write back, so I did both. Monk abundance activation that night. I hung the photo above my bed. Grandma smiling at nothing in particular. Just happy. Abundance activation message. Unaware of the empire she'd one day build, or the granddaughter who'd carry it forward. And I whispered, I know what the key open now. It wasn't a vault. The Pandif. It was a life. The Monroe family reunion was held at Savannah's new mansion in the hills. Abundance activation message. Imported marble floors. A caterer who wore white gloves. A jazz trio flown in from New Orleans. Ends activation message. It was everything my grandmother hated. I wasn't going to go. The lesson, but I thought about the Rusty Key. Peeblesall, and the life it had unlocked. So I went. Message. They didn't recognize me at first. Message. Adios. Not because I'd changed on the outside, but because I carried myself like I belonged. Savannah blinked first. Eliza, I smiled. Hi? Message, cousin. Her gaze darted to my shoes, plain black flats, her mouth curled with relief. Mrs. Postel, upon de Clunprise de hadn't come to compete, but she had no idea. Connor pulled me aside during dessert. Mrs. So, what are you working on these days? I heard your art sold well, he said, it casually. Stop abundance activation message, but his voice had an edge. The kind that came from knowing your grip was slipping. Nod. I've been busy, I said simply, running some projects. Starting a few funds. Like charities. Something like that. He hesitated. You know, non-stop abundance activation mess Kupala Bell. Grandma really surprised us with that will. But I'm glad you got something. I tilted my head. Me2. Later in the garden, Henry cornered me. Aunt's activation message. I've been thinking about diversifying my holdings. Top abundance activation message. Ever consider bringing family into your business? He said it like a compliment, like a gift. I looked activation message. I looked about at the flowers. Landscaped into perfect symmetry. Trimmed within an inch of their lives. No, I said, softly. Message. I like things that grow wild. Back in the city, the next morning, Esh and I mailed a single envelope to each of them. Inside a photograph, Essen Schumigrid. It showed the studio Grandma built for me. A corner of the ranch, sunlight spilling over canvases. Top abundance activation message. And one handwritten sentence on the back. She left you what you wanted. She left me what she loved. No name, no signature. Let them wonder. Mas in the message. Montana in the fall is unlike anywhere else. The air is sharp but gentle. Korolinka Benton is like delaying them be heard. Not a truth that doesn't need to scream to be heard. Message. The ranch had always felt big when I was a child. Now, it felt eternal. Message. The studio Grandma, built sat at the edge of a hill, facing the sunrise. North-facing windows. Open beams. Bare floors. It was quiet, not with silence, but with meaning. Message. I unlocked the door every morning the same way, slowly, reverently, as if stepping into a memory. Activation message. The canvases I painted here didn't care about critics. They didn't care about legacy or sales. Abundance activation message, they were for me. For her. For the part of me that still believed in the power of shadows, light, massage, and brushstrokes. One day, I found a box buried beneath the floorboards. Inside, dozens of Polaroids. Me, age 6, splattered in finger paint. Grandma, kneeling beside me, her hands covered in blue. Message. A note in her handwriting. You've always been my masterpiece. I wept. Non-stop abundance activation message. Not because I missed her, but because I could feel her there in the sun on the windowsill. Lech, in the krantz at creak of the floor, in the smell of oil paint and cedar. That night. Message. I stood outside the ranch house, staring up at a sky crowded with stars. Life finding Shika, and I finally said it out loud. You were right, Grandma. The key didn't just open a door. Munden abundance activation mechanism was, it opened me. The opening night of the Rusty Key Foundation was held in a renovated firehouse downtown. Bare brick walls, second-hand furniture, hand-painted signs. Nothing flashy, nothing curated. Message. Exactly how Grandma would have wanted it. Message. Kids wandered between the canvases and sculptures, some bold, some uncertain, their eyes wide. Message. Their shoulders not yet heavy with doubt. One boy, no older than 14. Nan starred at my piece titled Legacy. Its activation message. No. It's like she's painting the sky back into place. He whispered. I blinked fast. Smiled. Yeah, I said. She is. At the back of the room was a locked case. Inside, non-stop Aboriginal rusty key, now framed in velvet and glass. Below it, a plaque. Ashen. Message. To those given nothing and brave enough to turn it into everything. The next day, I flew back to Montana. The ranch felt colder in October. Pants activation message. But the land still breathed beneath my boots. I walked the perimeter of the property. The Stopalakuns, passing the old barn, the orchard, the stream where Grandma used to skip stones. Activation message. And that's when I found it. A narrow trail I hadn't noticed before, winding past a grove of birch trees. At the end, a small wooden bench, nailed into the back, and Pansa message, in Grandma's handwriting, for when she needs to remember. I sat there for a long time, think lesson, watching leaves fall like whispers, listening to wind that carried her laugh. And then, abundance activation message, almost without realizing it, I pulled a sketch pad from my coat and began to draw. Message. Not for the gallery, not for the foundation, just for me. That night, I called Mr. Whitman. I want to open a second location, I said. Somewhere rural. Abundance activation message. For kids who can't get to the city. I thought you might say that, he replied. Ian just stop a quiet joy, Anabranid's action joy. Your grandmother left instructions for that too. Of course she did. My siblings texted occasionally now. Short, vague, little stabs of curiosity wrapped in fake warmth. Saw you in the paper. Congrats. Oh, God. Mom says you're doing something with scholarships. Any chance we could hutch up? I didn't answer. Mation. The subhanly understood message, not out of pettiness, but because I'd finally understood something Grandma had known all along. Pasel majage. Thanuition. Not everyone gets to come into the life you build. We all start somewhere. Message. Maybe your beginning is just a rusted key, a failed dream, a forgotten voice. Mengshish. Blends urine. Or an old story nobody else believes in. But what matters isn't what you're handed. Message. It's what you hold on to. Activation message. And sometimes, what looks like the smallest inheritance is really the greatest gift. Money and then condensate on activescence her message. If you've ever carried something small that no one else valued, but you knew it mattered. Share it with us in the comments. Messaday. Your voice could unlock someone else's courage. Like, share Abundance Activation and subscribe to Telling Story with Me, Haro's Story with Me. Because the quietest stories often hold the loudest truths.